Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. Today, our San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera will be joining us to talk about Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's visit to Southern California on Thursday. And a little later in the program, El Paso correspondent Julian Resendiz will join us to talk about the joint U.S.-Mexican Navy SEAL training operations getting ready to take place south of the U.S.-Mexico border. But first, as always, let's start today's edition by taking a look at what's trending across the border. Starting with White House border czar Tom Homan, without offering further explanation, claimed that the federal immigration operation in Minnesota found thousands of missing children in the state. He said, quote, ICE here in this state have located 3,364 missing unaccompanied alien children. Children the last administration lost and weren't even looking for. He said that Thursday while announcing plans to end Operation Metro Surge, as we told you shortly after he made that announcement. The data is likely related to a much larger number the administration has been touting for a few years. Vice President J.D. Vance said in late 2024 that Homeland Security effectively lost 320,000 unaccompanied migrant children. That claim was fact-checked by the Associated Press and USA Today, both saying that that claim either misrepresents or distorts the data. A federal report found more than 320,000 children either failed to appear for their immigration hearings or didn't receive a notice to actually appear in court. It does not say that the children were lost. Essentially, they're unaccounted for. Those figures came from ICE and covered a period from October 2018 to September 2023, starting in the Trump administration and into the Biden administration. During that time period, President Trump was in his first term of office, as I just said, and then followed by now former President Joe Biden. A teenager was arrested by ICE agents outside the Hennepin County Government Center in Minnesota this week, where he was making a court appearance for a drug-related charge. The video shows plainclothes ICE agents pinning the teen, who was reported as being 18 years old, to the ground as bystanders blew whistles and condemned the officers. His arrest angered people who were in the building, many of them taking out cell phones to record the interaction and cursing at the agents. Some yelled that the teen had an attorney. The Hennepin County attorney condemned the use of local government courthouses for immigration enforcement, saying it, quote, interferes with the administration of justice, prevents witnesses from testifying, and robs victims of their opportunity to seek justice, end quote. They also called the arrest disruptive and disturbing. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem visited Southern California on Thursday, and she was met by a large group of protesters. Time now to bring in our San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera live to tell us what happened. Esa.
Rudy, good day. I must say right off the bat that I was not part of the coverage. I was not allowed to get near Secretary Noem. We found out that they basically, DHS handpicked the reporters it wanted to cover her visit to San Diego, and I was not part of that. What I am about to tell you is information that I have read from news accounts or by talking to people who were actually there. She came to San Diego, specifically the Otay Mesa port of entry, which is a large commercial entry. A lot of trucks go back and forth through that area, which is southeast of downtown San Diego, obviously right on the border. She was touting the efforts that have been made by CBP since President Trump took over. She's saying that more than 188,000 pounds of drugs, specifically cocaine, meth, and fentanyl, have been seized at the border. She was saying that enough fentanyl has been seized to save 1.7 billion people. That's hard to believe because the population in the entire country is less than 350 million. But that's what she said. They have that they have recovered enough doses to kill 1.7 billion people in this country. She was again thanking CBP for its efforts, thanking what's been going on, thanking the president for his part in helping this. Now, you mentioned, Rudy, that there were demonstrators and protesters right outside the facility. I have to tell you that the Otay Mesa port of entry is surrounded by very large walls all around the perimeter, so you can't really see anything from the street. You know that trucks are there, you can hear them. So the protesters made themselves heard by beating drums, horns, shouting, chanting. It was so loud that one of the reporters who did cover the event was telling me they were so loud that CBP sent cars out there facing the protesters and literally turned on the sirens, the woo, 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 to drown them out. She said that during the news conference, you couldn't hear the protesters anymore. You could hear the sirens. She said even for reporters covering the event, it was very hard to hear what Noem was saying unless you had earphones. And that's how she was able to decipher what Secretary Noem was saying. The protesters were there, they were loud, and they did to a certain extent disrupt. We heard initially that the news conference was going to be held outside, but that was not true. They was always intended to hold it inside in a warehouse. She was surrounded by boxes and bags, reportedly boxes and bags of drugs that have been confiscated in the San Diego area. So Rudy, aside from her visit to the Otay Mesa port of entry, I really don't know much more about the extent of what she saw, what she witnessed, who she talked to. But while she was at the Otay Mesa port of entry, a lot of disruption, a lot of protests, a lot of demonstrators yelling and screaming, chanting for her to go home, and other things that aren't so nice, some things that I can't repeat on the air.
Now, as far as Minnesota for a moment, if we can just touch on that, we saw the drawdown this week happening. Did she say anything about the cooperation between the Department of Homeland Security and the state of California as we see Minnesota, or at least Tom Homan say that law enforcement agencies and municipalities and other government officials are looking to cooperate more with DHS to get rid of people that may be in the country illegally?
She certainly did mention California, specifically Governor Gavin Newsom. And she said, and you're about to hear from her, that if the Governor Newsom, would be involved, that a lot more things would be getting done in terms of immigration enforcement.
What I would say is I hope that Governor Newsom will partner with us more, that he would work with us to honor our detainers. You heard me earlier in my statement say that there's 33,000 people that are in California jails that have committed crimes against the American people. Before they are released back out onto our streets, give them to us so that if they're criminal, illegal aliens, we can return them back to their home countries so that there aren't any more victims in this country.
And wow, going to what you were just saying, you heard from people on the ground there. I could tell that her microphone, as we call it in our industry, that thing was hot. It was pumped up all the way, and you could still barely hear her over those whistles and the protesters. And then I finally heard those sirens that you mentioned as well.
And they were apparently they were very loud. And the reporter who was there told me that the CBP came out and parked the cars right in front facing the protesters and then turned on their sirens. Another thing that Secretary Noem mentioned, she was upset with the fact that the DHS has not gotten funding. This is all part of the fight that's been going on in Washington to keep the government open. She's saying that DHS is the only department that has not been fully funded. She said that Secret Service, TSA, Coast Guard, and other federal agencies that do law enforcement will be affected unless the government funds them. She was saying that some of these people will not be getting their paychecks, will not be getting paid for what they do to protect our country. And she was hoping, lobbying for Congress, Senate to go ahead and finally fund fully the Department of Homeland Security, which she heads, as you know.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about that funding, there's a couple interesting points really happening, I think, on the fight for funding over on Capitol Hill right now. And the first is that ICE, which is the ultimate goal here for those folks on the left to defund, they're still going to be funded through, as you mentioned, it's FEMA, TSA, Coast Guard, the cybersecurity and infrastructure agency, which is very vital to our cyber protection here when it comes to the federal government. But the second point is it's not just Democrats fighting against funding ICE. I believe we have Republicans also saying that there are things that, for example, warrants. Warrants has been a big issue for both sides of the aisle in that. So, and that funding lapse begins tonight at midnight. And for those of you at home that may not know, let's say they get to pass a bill on Monday to fund the rest of the Department of Homeland Security. That still means that there was 2 days without funding, and it's still got to pass through the House, the Senate, and get to the president's desk for a signature. And typically, that's not going to happen all in one day. It could happen, but as we've seen in past government shutdowns, even just a brief lapse in a shutdown, it still takes a couple days to get the ball rolling once that happens. But yeah, it's a very interesting topic. It's that's now 3 different government officials that we've seen in the last 24 hours kind of lobbying Congress to both sides of the aisle again to try to get some kind of deal done going forward. And just to mention what Democrats are looking for, they want more sanctions on ICE. They want body cameras on every ICE agent, which they've started doing in the state of Minnesota. The other thing they want is an end to the warrantless arrests, and they also want ICE agents to be removing their masks and an end to roving patrols, all things that we have covered here extensively on borderreport.com. Thank you very much for joining us, Salvador. We appreciate your time today. San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera joining us to talk about that Department of Homeland Security visit by Secretary Kristi Noem on Thursday afternoon. Stay with us, though. We've got a lot more to go. El Paso correspondent Julian Resendiz is going to be joining us after the break to talk about the U.S.-Mexican Navy SEAL training operations starting this weekend south of the border. So stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. El Paso correspondent Julian Resendiz joining us now to talk about some U.S.-Mexican joint military exercises coming up in Mexico. Julian?
Hi, Rudy. Good to be back. Before we get into the topic at hand, let me just follow up on something Salvador said. Secretary Noem keeps talking about fentanyl, even though, as we know, fentanyl overdose deaths in the U.S. have been going down. However, I am just in the middle of reporting a story about the fentanyl trafficking, which has not stopped, but is being interdicted. In October, I wrote about October being a record month as far as fentanyl seizures in one particular border enclave. We're talking about Nogales, Arizona. In that port of entry, which borders Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, one of the strong bases where the Sinaloa cartel is known to operate, officials there, CBP officials, in October seized 1 million fentanyl pills in 1 month. That was back in October. This past month, I'm in the middle of reporting a story in which it appears that CBP officers at the same Nogales jurisdiction interdicted 1 million fentanyl pills in 1 day.
Wow.
We're talking about 3 separate seizures in vehicles attempting to cross from Mexico into the U.S., obviously being driven by people who were either citizens or lawful residents or had some sort of lawful visa to enter the United States through the port of entry. Thanks to the work of canine officers, we're talking about drug-sniffing dogs, as well as the new technology that we've been talking about, those low-intensity X-ray scans through which many of the vehicles are not coming into the U.S. are now being made to pass through. The officers were able to interdict such a large amount of fentanyl. So it's still, the trafficking is still going on, mostly by the 2 big cartels, the Sinaloa cartel out there on the western portion of the border, Sonora, and what do you call it, Baja California. And over here on the eastern, my jurisdiction as well as yours, by primarily the Jalisco cartel and some of the elements of the Gulf cartel. Now, as far as the story at hand that I'm reporting today, Rudy, last year there was some controversy because a contingent of U.S. soldiers last January 2025, U.S. soldiers from the, let me see, from the from the Army's 7th Special Forces Group, Airborne, the so-called Green Berets, landed in an airport in the state of Campeche. And then they were escorted to a naval base in Mexico called Luis Carpizo. At this naval base in Mexico, the Green Berets were able to train Mexican Marines, Marine infantry, in interdiction tactics, combat tactics, such as what the Mexicans need right now to face off the drug cartels. That was last year. This year, again, another group of special forces from the U.S. In this case, U.S. Navy SEALs Team 2 are scheduled to land in Mexico next week to provide month-long training at the same Mexican base, Luis Carpizo base, to another contingent of Mexican military. Now, a lot of things have changed in 1 year. A year ago, there were some misgivings about a more aggressive United States with President Trump barely taking office. This year, the controversy has increased several-fold. Why? Because barely a little more than a month ago, the U.S. Incurred militarily into Venezuela and captured dictator Nicolas Maduro. So there was some opposition this week, some heated opposition this week in the Mexican Senate to American troops landing in Mexico. One senator, ironically from the same Morena ruling party that President Claudia Sheinbaum is from, was the loudest critic of this upcoming operation. He said, right now, I don't want American soldiers to set foot in Mexico, even if it is to come and plant little trees. But still, the Mexican Senate approved the mission. So the Navy SEALs will be landing in Mexico next week, and they'll be staying through mid-March conducting this training.
Now, let me ask you, because we've talked about this before when it comes to President Sheinbaum. It seems like she's stuck between a rock and a hard place right now, between letting her folks know in Mexico that Mexican sovereignty is incredibly critical for her administration, but also kind of walking a tightrope on the other end with President Trump and trying to look like she's cooperating when it comes to working to dismantle the cartel organization. What kind of pressure is she feeling at the moment?
Really, I think you nailed it right on the head. She's between a rock and a hard place. She has been in this position since President Trump took office, because President Trump has made several demands from Mexico, primarily in the immigration and drug trafficking arena, which in south of the border are both linked to the same player, and that is the drug cartels. They control both the illegal drug trafficking into the U.S., as well as have taken over the migrant trafficking along the border. The word I hear is that there's not an inch of border that a migrant can just walk through without being approached by a cartel operative or a cartel spotter and being asked for money. In some cases, as we have reported, almost on a weekly basis, migrants get kidnapped and they get placed in a safe house until they or their relatives are able to pay up more money. So there's definitely that pressure to deal with this cartel threat. On the other hand, the Morena party in particular, let me tell you, it's a populist party. And traditionally in Mexico, populist parties have been very nationalistic. That is, respect the flag, respect our sovereignty. And no, we haven't forgotten that you took half our territory a century and a half ago. So she is literally, like you said, walking a tightrope. And it seems that every week, every month, sometimes on a daily basis, she faces a new challenge, and she has to keep both sides, if not satisfied, at least appeased. In this case, she exerted her moral authority over her own party, which controls the Mexican Congress, the Mexican Senate, and she was able to get permission for a Hercules 130 U.S. airplane to land in Mexico, delivering this Navy SEALs for this training mission.
I wanted to ask you, because you're so tapped into Mexican politics, here in the United States, and I'll use the Trump administration as an example, and actually this current fight that we were just talking about over funding for DHS that I was just talking to Salvador about, it was kind of rare and shocking to see a Republican come out and vote no on that House passed bill in the Senate and say why. In this case, it was over the warrantless searches of homes for what could be harboring of illegal immigrants. How rare or how typical is it, I should say, for someone within their own party of the current sitting president in Mexico to speak out against an action that they're taking?
I think what this senator said on the floor of the Senate pretty much reflects the party line, including the president's stated philosophy toward the U.S. However, she has to accommodate something that she cannot deny, and that is cooperating with the United States. By cooperating in Mexico's own terms, Mexico can avoid any pressure, for instance, to allow boots on the ground or allow the U.S. to conduct cartel strikes in Mexico, because they're saying, hey, look, we're doing our part. We're accommodating you as much as our Constitution allows, and we have a common goal. Let's work within our own particular sets of laws to deal with that threat, in this case, the cartels. Yesterday, the President, Sheinbaum, she was asked, how do you reconcile this? I mean, you've been talking about, the U.S. should not have invaded Venezuela, and now we're allowing Navy SEALs to come to Mexico. And she kind of dismissed it. She kind of said, well, this is cooperation. This is something else. And we've done it before. And we have. Like I said, last year, the Green Berets came to conduct training in the same naval base in Campeche. And on the other side, on the U.S. side, it's not unusual for the Navy SEALs or any other number of special forces in the U.S. to conduct training on foreign soil. I believe we just showed, or we do have some images of Navy SEALs, in fact, training German forces and Lithuanian forces in a coastal town in Lithuania. Previously, the Navy SEALs were in, of all places, in India, helping Indian troops, special forces troops, gather the skills they need to control incursions into the country from several of their borders. So it's not unusual either way, but right now it's a politically charged moment, and that's why this is news.
Yeah, and just kind of tacking on to what you just mentioned about that international cooperation when it comes to training. I mean, this is something, when I was assigned to a NATO base, Spangdahlem Air Base, Germany, that was so common. We're always working hand in hand. We were always working hand in hand with our NATO partners, whether it be, taking a trip to different countries like Poland, for example, for a training mission. And I think what people have to understand is that that's kind of the goal. When you're not at war, you're always training and you're always trying to help your allies out a little bit as well. It's not just Navy SEALs, us regular folks in the service, we're kind of doing the same thing. So as you said, the Navy SEALs, they go all over the place as one of the premier special operating forces in the United States, all over the world, all over the globe, to help train the different special forces in the different countries that we have alliances with. So I just wanted to kind of tack on that little anecdote there to kind of, widen the whole thing, just not from special operations as well, but kind of just typical action. But in this case, as you said, just coming at a very politically charged time.
That's right. It's a political charged time, and like I said, there's also history behind this. Mexico has always been kind of reluctant to allow any sort of military presence from the United States in particular.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Julian. We appreciate you joining us today. Our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendiz, reporting on this upcoming joint special forces training between the U.S. and Mexico. We're going to take a quick break, get back to some more headlines when we return. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Border Report Live. Now that White House Border Czar Tom Homan announced the surge of immigration enforcement in Minnesota will end, one Texas congresswoman believes now is the time for the federal government to shift focus to immigration reform. Republican Monica de la Cruz is promoting a proposal to create a new visa program known as H-2C. It would provide temporary legal status for construction workers. Now, the idea is a response to a lack of migrant construction workers due to immigration enforcement. And one South Texas builder that we've had here on the program before said he fears the program, if approved, will take too long to help.
If it ever gets to the Senate's going to make their changes, send it back, and it's going to be a long shot before anything happens.
Now, the bill was introduced to the House in September and has been referred to 3 committees. Really quick, before we go, wanted to remind you to check out our partners at Political Power Ranker. It's a weekly show tracking the movers, shakers, and rule makers in American politics. Nextstar's Director of Political Content, Chris Berg, and Director of Emerson College Polling, Spencer Kimball, break down who's up and who's down in the world of politics based on data. Focusing on a few different states this week, the biggest one they're focusing on is Minnesota. Everything going on there right now. You're going to want to see the fresh polling on that, so make sure to tune in. You can find more on Political Power Ranker at abc27.com or your local Nexstar station's website. That's going to do it for us today. For Salvador in San Diego, Julian in El Paso, I'm Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen. We'll see you next time.